Hey everybody, my name is Sam White. I'm an artist, illustrator, and I stream on Twitch. I recently posted some of my scrapped and unfinished failed paintings, which a lot of both my viewers and other artists seem to question. So I thought it might be interesting to go over why I scrap paintings and why I call these paintings failed and unfinished, and take a dive into a bit of how I go about painting as an artist. Um, Now, I want to begin by saying I'm one of those people who will say, in a heartbeat, take as much time as you need to finish your personal work. If it's not for a client, there's not a deadline, you're not working in-house with a strict turnaround time, etc., this is your time to fully pour, I guess, your soul into the paintings and push yourself as much as possible. Limiting yourself to speed paintings and going as fast as possible, in my opinion, is a shitty thing to do for a lot of beginners, and I see a lot of beginners doing it, and it stunts your development. Now, recently, while chatting with a fellow artist here on Twitch Creative, I brought up the fact that I hadn't finished a painting in like 4 months. To which he responded, "You can't do that, man. Gotta keep going, even with work you don't like. You gotta finish your work." I agreed. I went over the fact that I reworked my paintings multiple times. I learned a lot from it, but by the end, it was just too far gone. Again, he agreed on this point. Um, as a little side note, I'd like to say that I'm never one of those people that's really truly ever happy with any of my paintings. There's maybe one or two paintings that I'm really truly happy with, and I've been happy with even at the end. This, however, seems to be more my mindset as an artist, as I'm always looking to the greats and comparing myself to them, even when I see all my artist friends and other artists saying that it's a bad idea. But in my mind, I want to be the best I can be, so I want to compare myself to the best. Back to the point. In my eyes, I believe that there's a point in a painting where you can rework it for the 18th time, or you can call it and learn from all your mistakes. There are certain times and places where it's beneficial to fully rework that painting, but sometimes you just gotta call it quits. Let's take, for example, this scrap painting. Now, before we get into analyzing these paintings, I want to say a lot of these I still like the main idea of, and I probably will rework them eventually. Most of them are compositional things, color things, but at the end of the day, most of it came down to I didn't plan properly. I had the general idea, and I liked the general idea, so I went from there, but I didn't continue to plan. And that's a mistake I'm seeing more and more recently with my work, is I'm not fully planning through my work. So I find an idea through my mess of chaos and control where I just scribble until I find something, and then from there I go with that. I don't experiment with the other compositions or the benefits that it could happen from experimenting with that main idea and continuing and reworking with it. I just go from the one I liked. Um, but again, here's some of the paintings I've recently scrapped and sketches that I scrapped that I eventually ended up finishing. So I scrapped these paintings probably at the beginning of the year this year. Um, None of them I really liked. I liked the general idea, but I thought a lot of them were too bland. I eventually ended up leading a couple of the variations of these paintings into this one, which I think I could have done a lot of things better with this painting, but it's an alright painting. Next is these ones. I did these ones probably last year. The main problem I had with these is I didn't really know where to go from here. I felt like a lot of these sketches were pretty alright, and that I liked the general idea of a lot of them, but I didn't know where to go from there. I eventually further developed one of them, and I still don't really like it. I don't like this one. The clouds look really shitty and fluffy. They don't look like they're rolling down the hills. The colors are alright. It needs something else. It needs something to add to it, but I just didn't add to it. So that's another one. Um, so before we get into these, I gotta talk some more. Um, Now onto the failed paintings. The single painting, this single painting went through so many variations. It all began with a critique from a friend saying, "Yeah, I mean all these thumbnails are great, but they're the same painting, same angle, same composition, etc." I actually didn't bring that example up, so let me go grab that. I didn't prepare properly. I'm sorry. I think it was these. These were the ones he critiqued and said they're basically all the same composition. And after looking at it more, I agreed. I thought they were pretty much all the same composition, same angle, same color scheme. A lot of these I wanted to keep in the general color scheme because I wanted to experiment with those types of colors. But it didn't matter because they were all still the same composition, same wide angle, establishing shot, nothing new with them. This led to that critique, which led me to explore compositions and variations in camera angles. I did a lot of these in black and white to try and just focus on the camera and the composition and making something more unique, I guess. So this led to this painting. This was the general composition that I liked. It went through a ton of variations. It went from just a simple palace with some steps to a weird flower place to, I don't know, like a water garden. And finally, there's the water palace. Still the water garden, but that still has the arch. And then it finally went to the red carpet with the guard overseeing people. After reworking this painting so many times, I realized my main problems though. And I'd spent so long on this painting, reworking it multiple times, that I didn't want to go through it again and continue to rework it. Now, some people would look at this painting and be like, "Sam, that's a good painting. Why are you calling this unfinished and failed?" And to me, it's failed because there's so much wrong with it, and I'm not happy with it. Like, most of my paintings I'm not happy with, but they're at least at a place where I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't look too bad. This one, I have clear problems with the way the character looks, the way the background characters look, the way the focal point doesn't really seem to jump out to you. Now, to me, the focal point should always jump out. It should be like a contrast of your brightest brights to your darkest darks. But that doesn't happen here. Basically, your brightest brights to darkest darks are around the arch, which shouldn't be. It should be the character, the main guard in the foreground. So there's so much problems with this single painting that I'd have to rework it again and again. And it all comes down to the fact that I didn't plan. Planning is a big thing that I'm noticing that I don't do with a lot of my paintings, because I don't usually have a general idea when I go into a painting. It's just I kind of go until I find something. If I go until I find something and use my regular way of thumbnailing, but then once I find a thumbnail that I like, I explore those ideas and variations, then I think I will learn more from that. So the main problems I have with this: when doing a painting, architecture, a detailed, thought-out perspective drawing is fucking key. I did not do a detailed, thought-out perspective drawing. You can see it in the earlier versions of this. The arch doesn't look right, it's flat, there's no perspective, the perspective is fucking god-awful, it's terrible. Even in the later versions, like, it's still wrong, it's still not quite right. So when I'm doing anything with architecture, you have to do a line art drawing for it. I know this now. And you have to do it thought out, precise line drawing. When doing a painting with characters, draw the character, just the body, and then add the clothing on top of it. The body itself will help you learn how the clothing should lay on top of that character. because I didn't do that and I just painted the character as a silhouette, it doesn't really look like the character's there. It just looks like a mass. It just looks like a giant mass of clothing, and it doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a character. It looks flat. So that's another problem with it. You need to realize what your focal point is when drawing, and detail up that part and add the main areas of contrast to it that will lead the eye into it. I didn't do that here. The main focal point looks more like it's over here around this arch when it should be this character. The main lead should be from here down into here and then maybe around this arch. It should be from the main character to these characters back here. These should be distant. This should be fucking non-existent, basically. As you get further back in space and further away from the focal point, it should kind of just degrade. It shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be looking at, like, this architecture up here and be like, oh, wow, that's really detailed. I should just look up here, because it distracts the eye. You should just be looking at, oh, this character is really detailed and thought out. That's the focal point. That's what you should be getting. So you should be getting lost edges up here. You should be getting lost edges down here and over here. This pillar is way too detailed for the fact that it's not really anything important. And again, another thing is to have good reference when doing architecture or characters. Having a reference board is really good for doing these very complex illustrations. Let's go to the next painting. So for this next one, let's call it the slime painting, the yellow slime. I really liked the general idea of this one. The main thing I liked about this one is the colors. I thought the colors were really good on this one, but my main problem with it was the overall placement of the trees and the perspective. Now, the trees are bland and boring. For a swamp that's supposed to be magical, there's supposed to be yellow slime just all around these trees. The trees are just bland and uninteresting. And if the trees in an environment, or just anything in general, are bland and uninteresting, it kind of will show, especially in an environment. So you have to simplify some of the minor parts and emphasize those larger parts, like the trees. You have to make those trees complex, but not too overbearing, if that makes sense. Basically, the trees aren't interesting, so I fucked up with that. As I went further on, they got worse and worse. I think the earlier versions of this was probably the best version of the painting. But as I continued on, I think I cropped it inwards, and I lost a lot of what I liked about the painting. So I might do this painting in the future, but I'll keep the general color palette as kind of like a reference, and then do some idea generation based off of that in terms of how I can place the trees and make them look better. Yeah. And the next one is the slave painting. Now, this is around the time earlier this year that I was trying to get better at characters, because I knew characters were a very bad part of my portfolio. So, the main issue with this painting is that it was way too ambitious. And ambition in terms of painting isn't a bad thing necessarily, but when you're trying to learn to get better at characters, it's better to start with a simple one-character image rather than jumping into a giant massive battle scene or a giant multi-character painting, because you're going to put way too much stress on yourself to make this painting work when you should be working on improving the anatomy and your rendering of characters and all that stuff. Before you jump into these massive scenes, get better at painting the main thing that you're going to be painting in this scene, which is the characters. Another problem that I had is it doesn't really portray what I was going for with the painting. In my head, I almost saw like a bounty hunter type character who goes out and gathers slaves for a massive slave trade industry in this world, having all these characters tied up, dehydrated from the march across the sandy desert, some characters with visible scars showing a wealthy merchant Prince with his armed guards, bartering with the main slave trader. Um, I wanted it to look like there was a massive, giant group of people behind them, and not just like 4 people. So I think this could work eventually when I'm better at characters, and I want to take another shot at it, but right now it's just not in the cards, and I need to get better at characters first. And I think this is the last one. Good thing there's no nipples, because I don't know, I might be able to get banned for that. Again, idea's okay for this one. The main problem was the execution. Is shit. I love the idea of some sort of oracle or seer getting high on some sort of hallucinogenic to get visions from God or something. If I had to choose one thing that was wrong with this painting, I believe it's the tent. Now, the tent is really, really weird. It doesn't really make sense for some sort of oracle to be in the tent. I mean, I guess you could go the route of it was some sort of gypsy oracle where they're on their mobile caravans, but I feel like they would more likely be in a temple or something like that. If I ever do this again, I would probably place the oracle getting its visions in some sort of temple with some sort of maybe some other character asking for his visions and being horrified of the visions that are coming from the smoke or something like that. Again, I like the general idea, it's just I didn't really do it too well. And also the anatomy shit. Like, I need to get better at characters, so I don't know. And I think I'll leave it there. All in all, I believe that a lot of these paintings, I learned a lot of what I needed to learn and took them on to the next painting. There's always that chance that I return to some of these paintings and try and do them justice. Sometimes I believe you just need to know when to move on with a painting and when to call it quits. Maybe in a few months you understand what it is that was making you mad with all those illustrations and how to remedy all those failures. This is why I'm open to letting paintings fail and be scrapped. For me, a failed painting or scrapped painting might come back later and be better. You just need to have an open mind on what is the failures and the faults of your own work and how you should remedy these failures. You are your own worst critic, but that's a blessing in disguise in my eyes. One of the best critiques I've ever received was not a long list of failures, blunders, and what you can do better, but just a simple question. What do you think is wrong with it? The artist sat me by him and asked that one simple question, to which I spouted off all the things that I had wrong in that painting to my eyes. He said, "Good, now just ask yourself that question while you're painting." I will never forget that crit for my entire career. And I hope that you guys ask yourself these questions while you're painting. Ask yourself what's wrong with your painting, how you can improve it. Ask yourself these questions. Just ask questions while you're painting, and you'll do better. And with that, I leave you. I hope you learned something from this. If not, sorry.